Okay, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our final installment of the fall semester of ACES. My name is Dave Vidito. I'm the Executive Director of Alumni Relations at John Carroll University and a member of the JCU class of 2000. Tonight, we are pleased to offer commentary on a topic that touches so many families on a daily basis, but its effects are elevated around the holidays. But before we introduce our speakers, I wanted to give a little background on our programming series offered to you by the JCU Office of Alumni Relations. The Alumni Continuing Education Series, or ACES for short, was established in the spring of 2013 by the Office of Alumni Relations in the spirit of lifelong learning. The program offers enrichment opportunities for alumni and friends through the expertise of members of the JCU administration, faculty, and alumni community. This past summer, for the first time, we went online. And with thousands of unique registrations just since May for topics ranging from the economy, civil rights, space exploration, and faith-based offerings, just to name a few, it's safe to say our alumni have responded. So again, welcome, and thank you for joining us. Before we ultimately turn things over to Dr. Martina Moore, I wanted to remind you that you can enter questions at any time in the chat box, and we will get to those at the end of the presentations. But first, I'd like to introduce Tommy Bruno, who will share some of the impactful programming he's involved with surrounding the themes of addiction and mental health. Tommy Bruno is the General Manager and Executive Director of WAPS FM, The Summit, an award-winning public radio music station broadcasting in Akron, Canton at 91.3 FM, and throughout Youngstown, Warren, and Western PA at 90.7 FM, and worldwide via mobile and the summit.fm. As general manager, Tommy is responsible for fundraising, business development, and the strategic growth plans of the radio station and its brands. Tommy got his start on the television side with WJW TV, now Fox 8 Cleveland. At the Summit, Tommy co-created and operates award-winning online streaming radio stations, including Kid Jam Radio, featuring positive music and programming for young listeners, and Rock and Recovery, which mixes music with stories that will inspire listeners and messages to give strength and hope. He is with us this evening to discuss Rock and Recovery, its mission and impact. Tommy has served on numerous nonprofit boards and advisory groups throughout the region, including the John Carroll University Alumni Association Board. He is a 1995 graduate of JCU. Please welcome Tommy Bruno.
All right, thanks, Dave. I appreciate that. I've got 5 minutes, folks, and I read today that it took Abraham Lincoln less than 5 minutes to deliver the Gettysburg Address. So hopefully I'll get through this in just about 4 minutes is what I've got timed out here. So thank you so much. I'm here to talk about rock and recovery. And it's something that's very close to my heart. In 20 years at the Summit, we had the opportunity to create a new radio station 10 years ago, and one that, boy, we really didn't realize at the time how important and impactful it could be. But here we are. Rock and Recovery asks this question, and it is pretty simple. Do you know someone? Do you love someone? Or are you someone who has experienced any of the following? So I want you to think about these things, and maybe in your mind, just think of perhaps if you've been through this experience, or maybe there's somebody that pulls on these heartstrings. Have you experienced a traumatic event? Perhaps it was a divorce, loss of a loved one, or maybe just a upheaval in your life that really just caused you severe trauma, or perhaps a sustained period of grief, a mental health disruption, maybe severe anxiety or depression, or certainly addiction recovery. And that's kind of how Rock and Recovery started, focused in on addiction recovery. But we found that mental health disruptions, anxiety, grief, trauma are all part of the human experience. And when I did some research on this, it's just amazing. Now, this is in the United States, but 70% of us have experienced some kind of traumatic event. The shared human condition continues. About 2.5 million people die annually leaving an average, and I thought this was fascinating, of 5 grieving people behind. And certainly, I know you probably are thinking of someone right now and just the people that when they passed away, the effect that it had on so many different people. 20% of adults experience a mental health illness of some kind, whether that's a limited disruption or something they deal with through medication. And about 21 million people in the United States have at least one addiction, only 10% of them receiving treatment. So, what is Rock and Recovery? Well, Rock and Recovery launched 10 years ago at the hallowed ground at Stan Hewitt Hall and Gardens, September 15th, 2011. That lodge right there was the site of Henrietta Seiberling on Mother's Day, May 12th, 1935, along with Dr. Bob Smith and Mr. Bill Wilson, where they formatted the essence and the real bones of AA, founded right here in Akron, Ohio. That meeting in 1935 was described as one of the most significant events of the 20th century. We thought it appropriate to launch our radio station called Rock and Recovery on the campus, on the sites of Stan Hewitt Hall and Gardens, right outside of that wonderful space right there. So, what is Rock and Recovery? All right, so Rock and Recovery is music, positive messaging, and stories of hope and encouragement. These are people that are going through or have experienced recovery in one way or another. It's 24/7, 365. It's available on a smartphone app and through our website. It's a resource, which includes on the website hundreds of interviews of musicians, healthcare professionals, athletes, and dozens more. And they just share how they got through their recovery, what they do each and every day. So we have a 3-hour nightly program here in Akron, Canton, Youngstown, and into Western PA. So we take a portion of what we have 24/7 and put it on every night through the terrestrial airwaves. We also have a podcast hosted by Mark Lee Shannon called Recovery Talks. It's the podcast. It was launched just a few months ago. We're up to episode number 12, doing really well with that. Rock and Recovery is also the Jim Cheneau Rock and Recovery Scholarship Program for high school seniors, where they answer those questions. Do they love someone, know someone, or are they someone who's gone through addiction recovery? They write a short essay or a one-dimensional piece of art or write a poem. And we have a scholarship program through the Akron Community Foundation where we give out a yoga sponsorship, a scholarship for college. We have recovery yoga, and it's a safe place to share your story through social media. So a lot going on with Rock Recovery, supporting lots of folks out in the community. I found it interesting. Does music heal? Can people turn on this radio station and hear a song and a message from somebody who's gotten through their day? Can it work? This was released just last week, the National Endowment for the Arts. And while this has driven the opioid epidemic, music and messages and stories is what we do. And in its first ever report addressing the nation's opioid crisis, the National Endowment for the Arts finds that incorporating music into treatments can contribute significant positive effects for patients. Music listening was shown to reduce post-operative pain, chronic pain, and the need to take medication. So we are really, really happy. I mean, yeah, we've been at this for 10 years, but we're finding that it's true. Music can heal. And so to kind of wrap it up, we are a nonprofit. We're a public radio station. We're funded by foundations here in the area, businesses and individuals. We support events. We've done hundreds and hundreds of events where we promote on the air the events that are going on to the recovery community. So we're not going to solve the recovery, anyone's trauma, but we're certainly going to be a piece in their toolbox as they go through their day, knowing that Rock and Recovery will be there for them. So thank you for allowing me to share some information on that. I appreciate it. And hopefully we've got a screen back here. And I'll introduce our featured attraction. Is that okay, Dave? I'll just keep going, huh, buddy?
Yeah, if you'd like to do the intro of Dr. Moore, please.
Dr. Martina Moore has been providing professional training and development services to others for 2 decades now. Let's see a smile from you. 2 decades. There you go, 20 years. She holds a PhD in counseling, education, and supervision. Dr. Moore is also the president and CEO of Moore Counseling and Mediation Services, has several outpatient alcohol and drug treatment centers throughout Northeast Ohio and Florida. Dr. Moore completed her PhD at Walden University in counseling, education, and supervision, and she holds a master's degree from in community counseling and human services from our very own John Carroll University, bachelor's of arts degree from Notre Dame College. She also has lots of certificates: substance abuse professional, certified mediator, and certified employee assistant professional. Dr. Moore is also a professor at John Carroll University, instructor at the Gestalt Institute of Cleveland. And in 2017-18, Dr. Moore traveled to Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam, where she taught students and psychology professionals about treatment methods for substance use disorder. If you haven't yet, I invite you to read Dr. Moore's full bio and her impressive list of honors, awards, achievements in the industry and her community. Please welcome Dr. Martina Moore.
Well, thank you, Tommy. Quite impressive. Thank you. And thank you for the work that you do with Rock Recovery. It is so needed. And you are absolutely right that good music, good stories, positive interactions are just some of the things that really help people throughout this recovery process. So I look forward to learning more about the work that you do. And thank you, Dave, for having me and asking me to be a part today. If you can allow me to share my screen, I'll get started because I know we're running just a little behind here with the technical difficulties, but that's what happens these days. So do I have that access to be able to do that yet, Dave?
You should now, Dr. Moore, yes.
All right, so now if I can remember how to do that, we'll be moving right along. Okay, there we are. Share that screen. All right. All right, are you able to see that now? Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
All right, excellent. All right, thank you. All right, so as Tommy said, I'm Martina Moore. I am the coordinator of our substance use disorder concentration, which is a part of the clinical mental health department of counseling at John Carroll University, where we train students to become clinical mental health counselors and in mental health as well as substance use disorders. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about holiday blues and turning those holiday blues into holiday joys. And especially today, this year, now more than ever, it is important that we're able to do this and that we talk about this. I've done this training a couple of years ago, and I actually did it last year. And as I was looking at this again, I said, wow, we have to really take a different twist this year because we're in a different place. So hopefully something that I say today will help you or be helpful for you to add for someone else that may need the assistance. So most people consider the holiday season as the happiest time of the year. You know, we hear the song, it's the joyous, happiest time of the year. My husband is one, he starts the Christmas music in July, and I have to stop him. Okay, dear. But this year I didn't stop him because I realized I needed the joy. I needed to hear the music. So I have been listening to Christmas music since July. But it's difficult time as well because we do too much, we eat too much, we drink too much, we spend too much, and this year, too much isolation. So this seminar will provide tips on how to beat the holiday blues and really turn that around. So let's first talk about seasonal affective disorder. Seasonal affective disorder is a disorder that is in our diagnostic manual, our DSM-5. We also call it SAD, or we call it the winter blues. It's a type of depression that comes on seasonally. In Ohio and in the Midwest, more people are affected by seasonal affective disorder because we have the cold weather. It's dark now by 5 o'clock. It's dark when we wake up in the morning. The days are shorter. And so the time that we spend outside getting things like sunlight, exercise, interaction has all been challenged. And so many individuals will begin to develop what we call seasonal affective disorder. And sometimes they will need to see a doctor in order to get medications for it. But honestly, that's only in very extreme cases that I've seen, in very rare cases. Most individuals can really deal with seasonal affective disorders by just doing a few things that we're going to talk about today. So some of the symptoms we see of someone with seasonal affective disorder is oversleeping. You might have some appetite changes and really having cravings for things like sweets, carbohydrates, those kind of things. You'll find yourself maybe gaining weight, and even if it's just 5 to 10 pounds, being tired or having low energy. And due to COVID, there's a chance of experiencing these symptoms at higher levels than in the past. And that's really due to the fact is because we are isolated. Now we're on at least a partial shutdown. So there are some things that we could normally do that we don't do. Like maybe still going out to see friends or maybe going to the gym and those types of things. And even though I know there are some people that are doing that, we are really being encouraged not to, or you may be fearful of doing so. And so due to COVID, we are really predicting that this year we will see more cases of SAD and more severe cases of SAD, just because some of the things that we would recommend, people aren't able to do because of COVID and because of the isolation. So these are some things you can do though. One of the things is you can get natural light. One of the things that I invested in a long time ago was a sun lamp. And so that really does help me with just getting some natural light. And even though we are to social distance, doesn't mean we have to social isolate. We can still get out and exercise. We can still find ways to be sociable outside, even if it's being away from people and being just around people, but making sure that we're distancing ourselves. Listening to the upbeat music. And I was so glad to hear about the radio station, because that's one of the actually one of the techniques that I give to a lot of my clients. I'll ask them, can they get a song in their head that makes them tap their feet? Can they think of a song that makes them smile? Can they think of a song that makes them want to get up and dance, even though they don't? And I say to them, when you're having your rough day, turn that song on, put it on and play it over and over. The other piece is to work on positive thoughts and positive words. Our minds are really the key to how our outcome can be in so many situations. If we can begin to change our thoughts and begin to change our words, we can begin to truly see some changes in our lives. You know, I hear people saying so many negative things right now. People are negative about not being able to be around family. Things are so different now. When are we going back to normal? Things will never be the same. And so I started writing a gratitude sheet. And I'll tell you, and I was afraid to say this, there are some positive outcomes that have happened in my life as a result of all of this. And so I began to think about those things. And sure, there are some very sad things that have happened. I lost a grandparent to COVID. My husband was very sick. It's been a very sad time in many ways. And there's also been some things that have come out of this. Like, until tonight, I don't work past 5 o'clock anymore. Or I make sure that I am home by a certain time so that I can get out and exercise before it gets dark. And I mean, it's just little things that I put into my life. So watch what you eat, take vitamins to enhance your mood, proteins and vitamin B, vitamin D, the omegas, all of that is extremely good for us. And I know you've heard it before, but we have to reduce the carbs, especially now where we get less sunlight, less activity, and it really does affect our mood. So if you're anything like me, I enjoy carbs, but I had to reduce them because they're not healthy for me when I'm already fighting to keep my emotional mood intact. So some other things is really overcoming this whole holiday stress. So today's Cyber Monday. People are shopping online. You know, even though people said that they were not going to go out for Black Friday, many places were crowded. People are feeling stressed that, okay, I've got to buy something. I can't see my family. I've got to be able to get them something. And the truth is, many people are struggling financially right now because of COVID, because of a decrease in some incomes. or some households not having the income that they used to have. So we really need to look at eliminating the holiday stress. So this is just something that I tell people. Avoid toxic people whenever possible. I mean, some people are just toxic. I had a friend yesterday. I'll give a little secret about myself. I am a die-hard Browns fan. Always has been. Lose, lose, or win. I don't care. And so I've been really, really excited. You know, when have we at when 8-3? Come on. I know 1990 something. But look at the Browns. Go Browns. It gives me something to be excited about. Well, everybody that knows me knows that. So a good friend of mine sent me a text yesterday and she said, the Browns still suck. And I was so angry. And I said to her, well, that's usually your perspective. And that's probably how your life always turns out the way it is. Okay, it wasn't so nice. But the point is, we need to avoid toxic people, especially when we're trying to hold on to our peace, to our joy, and not have stress. Practice your breathing. I know I'm a counselor. It sounds a little wacky, but it is true. If you just sit and you take deep, slow breaths, if you're mindful of your breathing, if you relax your breathing, if you count your breathing, if you become aware of your breathing, it really does help with the stress and tension. And then I'm really telling people to prioritize your preparations. As the pressure mounts, especially this year of how you're going to do the holidays, if you're going to do the holidays, who will you do it with? Will it be a small group? Will it be the usual group? Really practice, really prioritizing your preparations. You don't have to do it the same way you've always done it. You don't have to do it completely at all if you don't want to. Make sure you get enough sleep. The National Sleep Foundation recommends that adults get 7 to 9 hours of sleep each night. I am one. I'm in bed by 9 o'clock. I love my sleep. Sleep is near and dear to me, and it is extremely important. Now, I do realize that some people suffer from sleep disorders. So it's important, if that's you, to really work with your doctor on a regimen so that you can get the most optimal sleep for yourself. You know, enjoy free holiday activities. And we know we can't go away. We're not supposed to travel, but there are a lot of free holiday activities. So one of the things I'm going to do this week, not going to get out of the car, but I'm going to drive downtown Cleveland with my husband and see the lights and our grandchildren. I'm looking forward to that. That's a free activity that we can do. Have reasonable holiday expectations. What happens in holiday movies is not the reality. Now, I love my Hallmark holiday movies. I start watching them as soon as they come out in November, but I know it's not the reality, but they feel good. Don't be afraid to try something new. This year especially, celebrate the holiday in whatever way you want to and try something different. All right, this is a biggie. Don't drink too much alcohol. Excessive drinking can cause increased depressive symptoms. And I'm not saying everybody here is an alcoholic, even those that are not in recovery, even those that are not alcoholics, we still need to not intake too much alcohol because it cannot be good for us. And especially now, it's easy to do that. So coping with grief through the holidays. I mean, grief is just a reality. And this year, it is even more. This is the first time, and I saw that Tommy had talked about trauma. This is the first time that every single one of us are experiencing trauma at the same time. We are in the middle of a traumatic event, and we're all experiencing it at the same time. We may be experiencing it differently, but this whole pandemic is a traumatic event. And we don't know, we have no clue of what it's going to look like for us 5, 10, 15 years later as a result of this trauma. The PTSD from this, we have no idea what that will look like in years to come. So for those of us that are coping with grief right now, it's what I call compounded trauma, because we're dealing maybe with losing a loved one, also being disconnected from family and friends, and the reality of life not being the way that it's always been. So just a few tips on coping with grief during the holidays. Try to avoid canceling the holidays altogether, and especially now. I know that's a temptation, but you want to do something, and I'll talk about ways that you can do it safely. Allow yourself to feel joy, sadness, anger, and allow yourself to grieve the way you want to. Don't let anyone tell you the way that you should grieve, that you should be over this, that this is not the way it should be. Allow it to be unique for you and the way that you need to do it, and honor your grief. Set realistic expectations for yourself and remind yourself that this year is different. And if there's some things you can't handle, give yourself permission not to handle them. And take others up on things like, okay, I had a family friend who decided she wanted to drop everybody off bakery this year. So I didn't have to bake. That was fine. I took her up on that because I was already tired. So that was very helpful. Surround yourself with people who love and support you. People who are positive, people who can feed into you, people who will fill your tank and not drain your tank. And that's extremely important, that you avoid those that will drain you. For those who may have dealt with a divorce during this time or before this time, that's another piece. And we can't avoid that because during the holidays, things can look and feel so different. So ask if you're acting, especially if you have children, in the best interest of the child. Decide ahead of time what holidays will be divided up, what that'll look like. And if you're the parent without the children for this holiday, make sure you plan for yourself. Make sure you're not by yourself. Make sure that you're not isolated, but that you have something enjoyable for yourself. And create new rituals and family traditions. And that's really a group that I do with a lot of my clients who have gone through a divorce, because many people have been married for years and they had traditions. And so they have to come up with new traditions. And so consider an alternative day or time or a place to celebrate your holiday in a way, but don't be afraid to create something new for yourself and for your family. If you have children, reassure them that the holiday celebrations will continue, but just that they'll be in a different way. And allow them to be a part of coming up with, how do we want this to look now that our family looks different? And just remember to plan ahead. And like I said, have that additional family support as needed. And taking care of yourself. Get the proper amount of sleep, exercise, rest. Don't overeat, don't over medicate, any of those things to deal with your pain. But in the long run, it just creates more problems. So really get the assistance that you need. For our seniors, it's important that we check on our seniors. And if we have any of our seniors out there, I would encourage you to explore old memories. There are a lot of seniors that are now in assisted living facilities where they can't visit their family. Their family members cannot visit them. They've been isolated since March. So we really need to be thoughtful and reach out to them and help them. And if they're living alone, being sure that they're monitoring their medication intake, they're getting some quality time. And another big piece with our seniors is their alcohol consumption. And many people don't think about that, but they have lower levels of tolerance and the ability to take in alcohol. So we just want to encourage them to be careful because this is a time where they can overindulge just from being alone, being lonely, being isolated. And so one of the last things I want to talk about is taking charge and self-care. And there's just 8 ways to do that. Know your needs and ask people to help you meet them. Don't put higher expectations on yourself than you put on others. Have a plan of action to help you enjoy the holidays, and think positively about yourself, your family, your friends, and your situations. Try not to compare yourself to others, and try not to compare this season to seasons in the past. This is an opportunity for us to say, remember in 2020, where we changed everything in the way that we did things, and pat yourself on the back for getting through another holiday, especially during 2020. So for COVID during this time, find alternative ways to connect with your family and friends like Zoom, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams. One of the things I'm doing this year is I'm mailing cards to families and friends, telling them how I feel about them. Pick up the phone. You'll be surprised how many people don't pick up the phone anymore. And call or FaceTime your family and friends. Not just texting, but calling people. Do a gift exchange via Zoom. Schedule a game night via Zoom. Practice self-talk. My ability to distance now is giving me a better chance with spending more time in the future with my loved ones. And that's what I had to keep telling myself on Thanksgiving. Have conversations with your children or grandchildren about COVID and listen to how they feel about the changes. My granddaughter told me recently, she says, I don't like this pandemic. I don't have friends anymore. And she was right, because she's not around her friends anymore because she's not in school. So do at least one moment of gratitude each day. And that's something that I try to practice every morning as I get up and I center myself and I do my morning devotion. Is I try to practice one thing that I'm grateful for and gratitude each day. And it just takes us such a long way of doing all this. It helps with your self-care, being present around others, taking care of your physical health. And one of the last things I want to talk to you about is taking time to engage in your own self-care activities, especially now. I talked about walking, yoga, meditation, any of those things that you can practice now. And if you can't get out to do them, there are videos on the web. You can go on the TV and find them. There's just so much you can do. And if you find that all of that's not helping, there's nothing wrong with calling a counselor. There's nothing with picking up the phone and saying, maybe it's time for me to talk to someone. It just makes all the world of difference. It doesn't mean we're going to diagnose you. It doesn't mean that you're going to need medications. It doesn't mean that you're losing it. What it does mean is that you're taking care of yourself. So I want to close with just allowing you to give yourself a moment to really set realistic goals for yourself and take care of yourself. If you're having some issues with family, set aside differences. This is not the time for it. Try something new, try something free, try something simple just for you. Thank you and enjoy your holidays.
Well, thank you, Dr. Moore. That was fantastic. Tommy, thank you as well. We really appreciate your time this evening. We're going to get into some questions here shortly. Just a few comments. First, Dr. Moore, our condolences for the loss of your grandparent during this time of COVID. So sad to hear that. And like you said, thank goodness for the Cleveland Browns. If they were having another Cleveland Browns year, this year would be a lot harder for a lot of us. So thank goodness for that. We are going to ask some questions about each presentation, and I want to draw Tommy and Martina in a little bit. Remind you can enter your questions in the chat box on this Zoom call. And we've had some questions submitted directly as well. So we can get into that. We're going to, again, ask some questions about this presentation, but also tap into your general expertise in this arena, right? So the first question actually is for Dr. Moore, who brought this up earlier, I think to lead things off, which was a sun lamp, right? So how do you even use one? How do you use yours? How is it effective? What can you share about strategy with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can actually go on Amazon and you can search for them and find them. I will use them at the darker times of day. So at about 5 or 6 o'clock when I'm home, I'll turn it on. I'm making sure that my day is extended, because we have this process from about August on where we daylight. So the goal is to try to simulate that daylight again. And so I try to simulate that daylight until about 8 or 9 o'clock until I go to bed, just to make sure that I am taking in a proper amount of light and just not sitting in the dark for the rest of the day.
Got it. Tommy, this one's for you. Who are some of your community partners with Rock and Recovery? And what has been your strategy to, I don't want to say expand your audience, but certainly get your product and your service in front of as many people who need it?
Yeah, so the community partners include PEGS Foundation, which is a foundation in Hudson that has been funding us from day one. Summa Health System, Akron Community Foundation, and then all of the ADM supported organizations within Akron, which is community support services, et cetera. All those are on board. We have partnerships with them, Oriana House, et cetera. where they share their resources with us. So Garrett Hart, our program director, will interview them in long and short form interviews. To be honest, and I think Dr. Moore will agree with this. When we created this, it wasn't until we became authentic about addiction recovery. I went through a really traumatic event in my life and was able to, to feel a different sense of the importance of music and messaging, and like Dr. Moore said, surrounding yourself with people that add joy to your life. So the program partners are Summit County based now, but we're creeping our way into the Mahoning Valley and into other markets. And our goals include, with this podcast, certainly launching that internationally, but certainly taking a 1 hour component of Rock and Recovery and putting it on radio stations all over the country.
And it's interesting, something you said, Tommy, just kind of, I wanted to probe that a little bit more. Being authentic, right? Are you kind of saying that almost, you having been touched by trauma or a loved one who's battled addiction of some sort has almost allowed you to, do your job more authentically? Is that kind of what you're getting at? You almost need to feel that pain yourself.
You do, and I'm not in long-term recovery, Garrett Hart, who's our program director, and I, in the beginning and for many years tried to whether it was in social media, and you can't fake this stuff, and we've surrounded ourselves, and to be honest, for those folks out of there that are listening that have a passion, one thing we did that was a great strategic move was that we created a separate advisory group of people like Dr. Moore that have the education, that have the life experience, and people that have gone through addiction recovery. And these 12 to 14 people have really helped shape this next evolution of Rock and Recovery. And it wasn't like we weren't doing things well for the first many years. It's just, it took us a while to find that sweet spot. And I think we have, thanks to a lot of great people in the community.
Great. You mentioned social media. This question came from one of our viewers tonight. What are your thoughts, Dr. Moore or Tommy? What are your thoughts on how to approach social media during the holidays?
We need to approach it carefully, as we do with all relationships. Social media is a place where you interact with others. And so we need to be mindful of what we're taking in and taking in on doses and that is appropriate for us. I personally will only take in small doses, and there are only certain people that I'll take it in, and certain vehicles that I'll take it in from, especially when things are not going that well, because it's not good for me. I encourage people to be careful. And those people who are going to just chilling now. So it's just important that you're very careful with it, extremely.
Great. Thank you. During this time of COVID, this very difficult year, are there certain mental health issues and addiction issues that have been impacted more by this pandemic and this crisis than others? So eating disorders, for instance. Are there some members of our community that we need to look out for more than others?
Absolutely. We've seen an increase in domestic violence as a result of people being home together, children being home and not being in school, neglect, child abuse. We've seen an increase in anxiety. I mean, this is already an anxiety provoking situation. And so for individuals who already have experienced an anxiety disorder, we see that their anxiety disorder is exacerbated as a result of this. We've seen an increase in drug and alcohol use, and especially opiates. We've seen a strong increase in opiates and other drugs. All of our drugs, amphetamines, methamphetamines, crack cocaine is back on the rise. We're seeing more of that. Unfortunately, in our agencies, like the one that I have, we are extremely busy. I was there this morning. I got there at 8 o'clock this morning, and We had clients waiting in the lobby then. We can't shut the doors down because they need the help and people are still coming for it even the more. So I would say all of them, the mood disorders, all across the spectrum. And the most interesting part are people who have many of the psychotic disorders, because this kind of plays into the paranoia, and just, people not trusting the government and just so much. And so when I say the mental health disorders are heightened, they're at an all-time high. And it just really requires those of us who are what they say essential workers still to be there in the trenches working.
Along those lines, Tommy, are you seeing more of a response this year in particular to the Rock and Recovery program? Are you hearing from more listeners?
Yeah. So, our business model at the summit, that's really where we, pays the bills. The summit in 91.3 has always been at the forefront of this and of our mission. And this year we lost about $350,000 in business underwriting. So what that is, folks, in public radio, they're not commercials, but they're organizations that believe in this niche audience in public media, public radio, and they pay to have their message put on to thank them for their donations. It's essentially a donation. But when you think about it, you're talking about Live Nation, House of Blues, Blossom Music Center, the Cleveland Orchestra, the Canton Orchestra, all the cities that believe in our audience, Cuyahoga Falls, Cleveland, Akron, all these cities, all led to about, 35% of our $1 million budget gone. So as a group, we sat down and decided to double down on Rock and Recovery. We really couldn't bring that business back, and we knew that we had a renewed responsibility to our community and to what they were experiencing through COVID. And so, literally 8 months ago, we put all of our resources into Rock and Recovery. We got some really wonderful grants from the community, some individual donations. And I can tell you that there's a renewed interest, not just from the community and from our members, but from our team. Our team has grown, and we just feel a greater responsibility. Let's put it that way. And yes, our audience has grown, fortunately or unfortunately.
Yeah. Thanks, Tommy. We have time for just a couple more questions, and I wanted to ask something specific of Dr. Moore. Let's visualize this as a normal year. This isn't COVID, right? We're gathering around the holidays. When you have a loved one or someone in your family who's battling something like alcoholism, and they're recovering, right? How do you treat that at family gatherings, where there could be alcohol out, and, you don't want to tempt someone and you don't want to be the cause of them, having a relapse. So what's your advice for a family dealing with that?
Yeah, I encourage families to support their loved one who's in recovery, and to not have alcohol if they think that it may be a challenge, especially if someone's newer in recovery. It's just not healthy for them, and it's not good. And so we want them to be successful in their recovery process. One of the things in my family, my father has been in recovery for 35 years. It was a long time before there was any alcohol at any gathering we had for anything, because everybody was so happy that he got sober. No one wanted to be the cause of him relapsing. And I can remember being young, and my mom would tell my uncles and my cousins and so forth that they couldn't bring alcohol to the family gathering because of my dad. And people really respected that. And so I think that if we really want to support our family members, that's what we need to do.
Got it. Okay, well, let's wrap up. Actually, we got a question submitted from one of our viewers. It aligns with one we already had submitted. So I'll try and package the two if I could. From someone in the audience who is an educator, trying to make sure that her students know that she's there for them, to support them, but it's obviously difficult being socially distant and out of the classroom. So what are some things educators can do to support students and support a healthy mental health while being socially distant? And then the other question was more along the lines of, during the holidays, what can we do? You mentioned writing letters, and it sounds like we can make a playlist of upbeat music for our loved ones and people struggling right now. So what are some things we can do from a distance to support those under our care or those we love?
Yeah. So I'll start with the first question. That's a great question from the educator, and thank you for the service that you offer to our children. We've seen an increase in completed suicides from adolescents during this time. And it's very sad the numbers are increasing. And so what I would encourage educators to do is really spend time talking to the students about this. I mean, even a little 10 or 15 minutes set apart. Okay, guys, how are you dealing with all this? How is it being at home? You know, what is it like for you? And so really taking that time set aside to do that. For the second question, there's so many things that we can try. And I would just encourage that that's a question we put out to many people and say, okay, what are you doing differently? So my best friend and her family, they ate Thanksgiving together on Zoom, the whole entire family. So because grandma couldn't be there, she wanted to be able to see everybody. They wanted to social distance. So they did it together on Zoom. My family and I, we're going to open gifts together. We're going to ship each other a gift or drop it off on each other's porch. And then we're going to open them up together on Zoom. I mean, there's so many different things we can do. Like I said, sending mailing, sending cards, sending a message, sending a collage, sending pictures. There's so much we can do now. What I say is think about, for those of us who are a little older, think about what we used to do back in the day. So I remember why I decided to send out cards this year is because my parents used to get a stack of Christmas cards every year. And I thought about that. So I said, okay, I can send out Christmas cards. And so think about what we used to do. And let's try some of those things again.
Yeah, a little bit of nostalgia, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you both. Thank you all for joining us this evening. And a special thank you, of course, to Dr. Moore and Tommy Bruno for their presentations. Tommy, remarkable stuff you're doing down there at the summit and the radio station. You make us all proud. And thank you for all you do. And Dr. Moore, we just scratched the surface on your expertise tonight. So we'd love to have you back down the road to talk about other things that you're involved with and that you can lead us on. So hopefully we can see you again in the future. And as a reminder, all of our webinars are free to attend and archived on our YouTube channel under JCU Alumni. Please also check out our upcoming calendar of events, including several over the next few weeks. You can find those on our website at jcu.edu/alumni. And we ask that you remember John Carroll during this season of giving. In fact, tomorrow is Giving Tuesday. So if you are able, please make a contribution before the end of the calendar year, as we need your support now more than ever. Thank you all. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and we hope to see you again real soon. Good night.